prowess mirror match here between Ross Merriam and David Jones.
I don't know if these players work together or this is a known entity, but there's a lot of similarities here, you know, even down to things like the one main deck Dispel, 4 main deck copies of Slip Through Space, very similar looking list. Same threats, same 16 threats.
And these threats are all good, too. Now, one point of contention I've seen some people have with this particular deck is it seems like Jace is misplaced here.
Well, I can really get behind Jace alongside Expedite. That is sweet. Cheap thing to flash back and something to get your Jace going a turn earlier. You're right, it's a little bit on the light side for Jace. But this deck is also in the market for Merfolk Looter. You know, this is a deck that needs kind of every spell it can get its hands on. Doesn't have a lot of recourse if it floods out. You want to be filling up your graveyard for Treasure Cruise to be Ancestral Recall. So I agree with the critique, but I think Jace is still good enough to play here.
It looks like Merriam is on a mulligan to 4. 4 a common number in the future match
so
area thus far.
Yeah, we've hit it twice.
Brad Nelson taking a mulligan to 4 in round number 1 of the day, and now Ross Merriam looks like he's going to lay out 4 cards, and if he's able to keep, he'll get the scry due to the Vancouver mulligan rule. Some players at home wondering how many players we have here in Atlanta. 567 players here for the release of Oath of the Gatewatch. Looks like both players have done some mulliganing, so they will scry, move the cards as such, and now we're underway. David Jones with a mountain to begin round number 2.
The bad news here is that decks like this typically do not mulligan very well when you got things like Teamer Battle Rage, Titan Strength. I can speak from my own experiences. It's Grand Prix.
A polluted delta here for Jones. He's going to fall down to 19. Curious if Merriam was expecting a mirror match, because that's certainly what he's up against. There is a basic island there for David Jones.
But I can get behind this deck. This has a lot of what I like about a Tarka Red with a lot more staying power.
There is a Jace. It feels like we're just in phase 1 of this style of deck. Trying to figure out exactly the number of spells you want, which spells you want, how many of each creature you want. Because right now they have, 4 of everything. 4 Jace, 4 Swift Spear, 4 Storm Chaser Mage, and 4 Abbot of Carol Keep. But maybe those numbers change.
And Wandering Fumalore in a deck that's applying pressure. Oh, Teamer Battle Rage.
Ever heard of it?
That just works.
Yes, that's that. A member of Combo Nation.
Oh.
Yeah. A Sunken Hollow here for Ross. It does just work.
That just I mean, you need a million mana or whatever, but that does just work. Whew. I'm going to be building this when I get back to the room tonight.
You can dust off those Shivan Reefs too that haven't been seeing much play. As there's a roast.
Oh, I've got a lot of Shivan Reefs.
And it looks to be a 4 of in this deck. Had Jones's way.
Oh, that was another card that I bought many moons ago during a different holiday sale that's also appreciated nicely.
Shivan Reef?
All the lands.
Oh, fair enough.
People are expecting them to be very powerful because of the new Colorless Matters cards.
Here comes Monastery Swift Spear. A Bloodstained Mire to passing of the turn. If Ross didn't know what he was up against before, I think he's probably got an idea now, as there's a Jace of his own. Jones will sacrifice this Bloodstained Mire. See what land he wants to go dig up out of the deck. And he's going to go with a Smoldering Marsh. Fire Impulse will take care of the Jace. Now, I don't love taking care of it on the end step, because now you miss a prowess trigger.
Yeah, you have to be pretty certain that you're tapping out to justify that play. If Jones has something like Treasure Cruise in hand, then it makes sense. He's trying to be able to cruise this turn. But typically, yeah, you want to wait till your own turn. You might rip another prowess threat, too.
Well, here is a Bloodstained Mire. That's another card in the graveyard. Now, here's a card that maybe helped put this deck on the map.
Well, this alongside Expedite's new cycle of cheap cantrips, and it's obviously doing a lot of good work here. Cheap cantrips, very powerful with prowess threats, good for filling up your graveyard, and Expedite and Slip Through Space are both very good at facilitating combo kills via pump spells.
Treasure Cruise now. 3 cards on the way, and a prowess trigger for Monastery Swift Spear.
Also, Expedite plus Jace is a real thing.
No, I think that's actually a nice combo in this deck.
That's pretty sweet.
I think that Expedite is just a good card in this deck, because now here's Titan Strength. Little scry action here for David Jones.
Yeah, it's a little awkward because so many of your threats already have haste, but I think the synergy with Jace is very good. More prowess stuff. Also, with you having so many cheap cantrips in the deck, it really improves Abbot of Carol Keep as well. Now you're just flipping over, draw a card a lot more frequently too.
Getting deep in your deck, building up your graveyard for Treasure Cruise, which is obviously a very important card in this deck, as we head back David Jones's way. Merriam can only just play a land. 2 mana. There is a Storm Chaser Mage. That's an Expedite. Prowess triggers abound.
Double haste.
Yep. Here's a land. Here come the beatdowns.
Gets it twice.
Storm Chaser Mage, 1/3 flying haste prowess. It's an uncommon from Oath of the Gatewatch, and it looks to be a pretty gosh darn good one.
I'm going to be playing with this card for sure in the next couple of months.
It's right up your alley.
And what I really like about this card and moving the deck in this kind of direction is Oath of the Gatewatch has a lot of very powerful sweepers in it, a lot of powerful instant speed removal. I'm not sure that a deck like a Tarka Red is going to be viable if people have those kind of cards in the sideboard. A deck with counter spells and treasure cruise, you can hang around with people that have a couple sweepers in their deck. You can beat that. Also, a lot of these threats are going to have toughness that's high enough to survive those kind of sweeping effects as well. So I'm very excited about taking the Atarka Red style decks into this kind of direction instead.
A basic island here for Ross off of that Pluto Delta falls down to 7. Does he have any way to come back here? He's got to get these creatures off the battlefield. Now, one thing that this kind of deck does lack, as we take a look at the deck list, is actual direct damage. You're not going to find a card like Jeskai Charm. I don't know, Lightning Bolt is an example. Obviously not a card in the format, but you just don't find a lot of direct damage here.
No. I mean, when you have cards like Expedite and Slip Through Space, you are kind of committed to doing 20 with creatures. And this deck is in the market for as much cheap stuff as possible, and Standard doesn't really have a lot in the way of playable cheap burn besides Wild Slash. And Wild Slash is not really a great burn spell. It's a fine removal spell. Having the option to hit your opponent's great, but you don't have the critical mass of Stoke the Flame, Boros Charm type of cards like you once did.
Here's Treasure Cruise from Merriam. Pay 4 mana to draw 3 cards. Fiery Impulse among those cards. Also a Titan Strength and a Storm Chaser Mage. Looks like he's going to play that Fiery Impulse right now, try to get Swift Spear off the battlefield. That'll work. Now Jones will sacrifice a Bloodstained Mire, fall a little bit lower, dig a land out of his deck. Again, battle lands are all good to go, given the basic mountain and basic island on the battlefield. And there is a basic mountain there for Jones. Pretty expensive mountain there.
No, like $5 or $6.
Yeah.
Beta.
It's more than I'm willing to pay for my mountains. And if there's a blue-red deck like this in the format, we are in Atlanta. This is kind of the home of Andrew Schneider, my friend. The blue-red Delver King?
Wandering Fumalore and Stubborn Denial.
Combo.
That also just works.
Yep. And that's also a bunch of prowess triggers.
Not as good with Crater's Claws. That's not a good way to do it.
That's correct. I see the gears are turning, aren't they?
I once that door was unlocked for me mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you can play with ferocious cards and the land. Now that's all I'm going to be for the rest of the show. Is just thinking about other things.
How about Treasure Cruise? Are you okay with that?
Totally fine.
3 cards on the way and a prowess trigger. Roast, one of the cards drawn there from David Jones. His hand is loaded up. A Dispel there. Looks like an Abbot of Carol Keep as well. Looks like Abbot's where it'll go.
Expedite. All right.
Yep, just Polluted Delta, sorry. Sorry to disappoint you.
Yeah, Abbot and Expedite. That is also some sweetness.
It's a combo.
Whew.
Yeah, we found your deck for the
Yeah, I just already.
You can throw away the Atarka red cards. We'll work you into blue-red prowess.
And I already own the Shivan Reefs and the Abbots.
Yeah, so it's basically you basically
all I gotta do is buy the Jaces.
Yep. that's
not bad.
Pretty easy to do.
It's not bad.
That's all you and the rest of the Magic community have to do.
All I gotta do is buy some Jaces.
Magmatic Insight, it appears from Ross. So discard Shivan Reef. 2 cards on the way. I say get these creatures out of this deck. Let's work in some Sphinx's tutelages. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, you probably have to cut the Titan Strength too.
That's good. Slip Through Space, Expedite. Those might have to go. Perhaps that could be a sideboard plan.
Expedite your creature at a turn, untap, Slip Through Space it on my turn.
Yeah.
Just triggering the tutelage over and over again. That seems like a different deck. That's more complicated. That's outside the scope of this broadcast.
Maybe. Perhaps an Abbot on the way. It looks like it might be a Storm Chaser Mage for Ross. One of the things about this deck, well, I'll be interested to see because I don't want to say anything too definitive given it's the first time that we're watching it here, but not sure how well it plays defense.
Yeah, in the mirror match here, I can already tell with prowess and with the various one-mana spells, you want to be attacking, not blocking.
Yeah.
Ross is doing what he can. He mulliganed, and it took him a little while to get off the ground here, but I suspect this turn, given the number of spells in Jones's hand, is not going to go well here for Merriam.
I suppose we do forget. You know, Ross did mulligan to 4 this game.
Yep.
So he's actually putting up quite a good fight given the mulligan.
Not saying it's his fault. I'm just saying this is where we're at.
Yeah. Another treasure cruise there in David Jones' hand, but his graveyard has been exhausted as he is cruised twice. Let's see what this will be. Slip through space. Trigger prowess. Draw a card. It's a nice addition for this deck. Blue to Delta appears to be the draw. What else David Jones got this turn? There's a roast in hand, just no target right now.
A little odd that this card is a devoid card and Expedite is not. It's a little odd.
A touch. A touch.
You know, I'm just saying, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Cards are printed, but just a little odd.
Yeah. Expedite could be for allies. Here come the beatdowns. 3 damage will come across there from the Abbott. Merriam's going to fall down to 2. And now just a passing of the turn. So Ross not dead yet. Can he come back?
And this deck doesn't have Become Immense, but it still has some of the capabilities to come back in spots like this and kill because of Team of Battle Rage and Titan Strength. If Jones has no interaction, it is conceivable for Ross to untap and kill him here.
Mm-hmm. What do we got here? It's going to be an Abbott. That'll be a new card. Titan Strength. Maybe not the time for that.
Yeah, it does not look like Ross has a lot in his hand to facilitate a combo kill this turn. He's got a variety of creatures, but not a lot in the way of pump spells.
There's a Swift Spear. Not going to be able to play the Titan Strength, so just pass that turn back over to David Jones, who will untap his 2 creatures in that island, take a draw step. Another slip through space might just get the job done here. And this is a deck as well, worth noting, very low land count.
Yeah, 21 lands here on both players' side. Ross even going so far as to play with 1 copy of Mag Insight here as an additional way to hedge against flooding out. It's important for this deck to do because with Treasure Cruise, even in a 21 land deck, with so many cheap spells and so many cantrips, you are susceptible to flooding out.
David Jones with another copy of Expedite in hand. How many is he's playing? Oh, he's playing 3 Expedites, where Ross is only playing 1. So there are some cosmetic differences here in the deck list. Here's Roast going after the Abbott. That'll trigger prowess here for David Jones. Now, what else can he do? I mean, that Dispel that he's had in his hand, can't really cast it, but I think it will be important.
It's a pretty great insurance policy.
Merriam's hand is forced in the blocks. Here's Expedite. That'll trigger prowess yet again. Draw some cards. Merriam's creatures are down. And now we head back Ross's way. Might be his final draw step of this particular game. Looks like he will start with a 1-mana Treasure Cruise, however. Can't dispel that one, so 3 cards on the way. Fiery Impulse is 1. Roast is 2. Didn't get a great look at the 3rd one. Looks like it was a slip through space. Here's a Roast. All right.
Got a Fiery Impulse and no spell on the other side. So there's a shot.
Unfortunately, a Dispel here for David Jones. He's been hanging on to for some time. We'll take care of that Fiery Impulse. The question now is, does Ross have another way to deal some damage that way? And I don't think he does. So now the hope is that David Jones does not have a spell to play.
Right. If Jones's hand is all lands, then Ross gets to play on here, but it's asking a lot given the number of times Jones has drawn 3 cards.
Slip through space there from Ross to draw another card. Jones will draw. It only takes 1 spell to turn the Storm Chaser Mage into a 2-power creature. Treasure Cruise will do just fine, and Merriam will concede the game. So David Jones will win game number 1 here over Ross Merriam. The Blue-Red Prowess Mirror goes to the player on the right as we get ready to take a look at the sideboards here for both players. Interesting matchup here. Did not expect to see this deck here this weekend. We'll start with Ross Merriam, 2 Dispel, 3 Disdainful Strokes, 2 Wild/2 Roast, a Boiling Earth and Arc Lightning, actually, 2 copies of Team of Battle Rage, Pia and Kieran Nalaar. I think that's going to play a role in things, and Sarkin the Dragon Speaker.
Pia Kieran Nalaar seems great to me in this kind of matchup. It's just a lot of stats, and if both players are boarding into a lot of removal spells, very good naturally in that kind of game. I think the 1 copy of Sarkin here is also pretty good. Just another removal spell and a threat that's fairly hard to answer. I can get behind the Dispels and probably some amount of the Wild/slash stuff. I think some of the other removal spells like Roast, Arc Lightning, Boiling Earth, I don't know if those cards work frequently enough, but it dispels the Wild/slashes, the Pia Kieran Nalaar, and the Sarkins. I'm a fan of all of it.
We'll take a look at David Jones. He's got 2 Disdainful Stroke, 2 Dispel, a Murderous Cut, so a little touch in black there, along with the Painful Truths. 2 Wild Slash Roast, 2 Duress, 2 P and Kieran Nalars of his own, and then 2 Boiling Earths.
I love the copies of Dispel here, the Murderous Cut, the P. Kieran Nalar, and the 2 copies of Duress. I'm not sure if it's worth splashing black in this deck or not. I haven't gotten to play with it much myself. The third color does seem like it's a pretty significant cost in terms of your lands, but Duress and Murderous Cuts both seem just great for this kind of matchup.
Well, those are the options there for both players. They'll shuffle up sideboard accordingly, and we'll watch game number 2 here in just a moment. In the meantime, we're going to talk about that Season 1 schedule here on the SCG Tour. We started in Las Vegas. That's where Caleb Scherer got the job done. He was your Season 4 Invitational champion last year. They'll let him go to the Players' Championship to make a Day 2 run there. Brian Braun got his first win on the SCG Tour, then the Open Series, now the SCG Tour. Crazy thing to think about given his success in Invitationals and Opens. Then for the new year, we went to Cincinnati. We saw Bobby Fortinelli basically get Amulet Bloom banned that weekend with some insane draws. He was your champion. And then in Charlotte, we saw Jund get the job done. Now we're here in Atlanta, and after that, we're going to Columbus.
Yeah, and then after that, we're off for Pro Tour weekend, so the regional championships will be taking place all over the United States. However, starcgames.com/regionals for more information. We posted all the venues. After the regional championships, we go to Louisville, then Philadelphia for our Legacy Open. Indianapolis will be standard. Baltimore will be standard, and then the Season 1 Invitational, Columbus, Ohio, April 15th through the 17th, standard and modern as the invitational formats.
Now, of course, for all of our Opens, you come, you play, you get kitchen links. You're all familiar with it now. Simple to get. No crazy strings attached. You're playing an Open, you get the playmat.
Exactly. You get it on site for free with registration for any of our 2-day Open Series events.
Well, we get ready here for game number 2. Between Ross Merriam and David Jones. Ross Merriam, the player that you're certainly familiar with. He's 27 from Middleton, Connecticut, but now he does reside in Roanoke, Virginia. 15 Open top 8s for Ross with 3 Open wins, 2 Invitational top 8s as well. Had one last year during Season 1 when we were in Richmond. Avid Jeopardy fan, which I can actually attest to, given some car rides with him. He just knows a bunch of stuff.
He has mentioned to me that he has aspirations for getting on the show, and that's also listed here. He's very into trivia.
From what I've been told, he's on the Jeopardy waiting list.
Okay.
So, if he ever gets on the big show.
He's a very smart guy, and he's very interested in accumulating tidbits of information. So not surprising to me that he's on the trajectory to get onto Jeopardy.
A big Roger Federer fan, and we know about the old cereal and milk nonsense debacle here for Ross. But someone who, over the past, I would say, 2.5 years, has really stepped his game up.
Yes, absolutely.
It's been a lot of fun to watch, and we've seen it mostly here on the SCG Tour. So we get ready here to watch him play game number 2 against David Jones, the Blue-Red Prowess Mirror. A very interesting deck here. Again, there are so many new cards from Oath of the Gatewatch. Storm Chaser Mage has enabled, I would say, this archetype along with Slip Through Space and Expedite in some capacity.
Yeah, the format didn't have a lot in the way of cheap cantrips, and Expedite and Slip Through Space have text boxes that are relevant for this sort of deck. This kind of deck would already be in the market to play with 1 mana draw a card because of Prowess. The fact that those cards have real text boxes is a huge bonus.
Now again, these aren't decks that play defense particularly well, so I'm curious to see how the sideboarded games will go when P and Kieran could show up, Sark and the Dragon Speaker could show up, among other things. A little bit more spot removal, a little bit more interaction with dispels on both sides. So, I'm not sure that either player was really preparing for the mirror, but they do have some options.
Well, what's interesting to me is Ross having the 3rd and 4th copies of Temur Battle Rage in the sideboard. I could see the philosophy being, all right, there's too much removal and dispel post board to go for the combo, I'm going to cut it, or I just want to be on the front foot the whole game, and I think Temur Battle Rage will be effective and actually bring in the 3rd or 4th copies. I'm not sure which way Ross is going to go.
Merriam started off with a Swift Spear. An attack on turn 1, now an attack on turn 2. Jones is going to fall down to 18, and now here's a Jace. Now here's what gets interesting. If you're David Jones and you have a copy of, I don't know, Fiery Impulse, Wild Slash, what have you, which one of these threats do you kill?
My lessons in these kind of matchups is that Swift Spear just has to be killed. It is too much damage, and if you're leaning too much on red removal, you have no chance of killing it somewhere down the line. That said, Jace is Jace, and that's also a very dangerous card to allow Merriam to untap with.
An island here for Jones is land number 2, and now there's an Abbot of Carroll Keep, so no removal at all, as the reveal is a Jace and a passing of the turn. Merriam will draw a copy of Shivan Reef. We'll see if perhaps he has a removal spell, if he wants to activate Jace, and how he wants to take his 3rd turn here. Magmatic Insight also in hand now. Merriam will start by activating Jace. Time to draw and discard. Pluto Delta was the draw. We'll see what the discard here is in just a moment.
Magnetic Insight plus Prowess Threats plus Treasure Cruise seems like a great engine to me.
I suppose the question is how many insights can you play? Ross was only one in his main deck this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, once you start adding more copies, you have to start adding more lands, and then you're cutting spells, and then what's the point? So you have to thread the needle in a very specific way, but one copy seems pretty reasonable to me.
There is an insight. Discard a polluted delta, draw 2 cards. Also starting to build a graveyard here for Jace to be able to flip it and maybe recast Magnetic Insight. A mountain here for Merriam is land number 3. That is a Wild Slash. Here's a pretty healthy attack.
That's a turn.
Yep. That felt like Legacy a little bit there.
Yep.
I mean, it's no brainstorm and ponder, but he did some sifting. You have to imagine he strengthens his hand, and now Jace is almost flipping. Now for David Jones, he's going to go expediting Jace. He needs to see a new card. Treasure Cruise was the draw. But it looks like this is a hand for David Jones that does not have any removal at this stage. Does have a Bloodstained Mire to play as a land.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of expedite, slip through space type effects.
Merriam will draw. Picked up a Dispel. Thinking about activating Jace, will activate Jace. Time to draw and discard, which means a transformation will take place in just a moment, as this is going to be card number 5 in the graveyard. Merriam thinking about discarding Shivan Reef. And away it goes. There's the flip. Jace going to go down to 2, looking to recast Magnetic Insight. Discard a land, and away we go. 2 more cards coming. There's also a prowess trigger there, the first. Wandering Fumarole, one of the lands that was drawn there.
There is some stuff going on here right now that feels closer to a modern deck than to a standard deck.
I agree. I agree.
The other side of it, though, is that Jones is sitting here with a bunch of, one-mana pump spells in his hand he can't cast. But on Ross' side of the table, this feels like an engine.
Bloodstained Mire going to dig up a mountain here for David Jones. It's obviously not perfect yet for what these two players are playing as far as the deck list is concerned, but you can definitely tell that there's something here.
Yep. And it's a question how good the mana is. If there was a blue-red battle land, I think this would be very easy to pull off, but yeah, has a lot of cheap red spells and a lot of cheap blue spells and no real good dual land besides the creature land. So how consistent is your mana? Shivan Reef's doing a lot of work here, I'm sure.
That's for sure. Expedite there on the end set from David Jones, going to allow him to get a little bit deeper into his deck. See what we have here. It's a Jace for him. Can he expedite it? Does he want to expedite? He's got expedite in hand. There is expedite. Does that work? Fiery Impulse is going to try to stop it. And a Dispel will stop that. And a Dispel will counter the Dispel.
Yet another tough turn here for Jones.
Yeah.
Jace is dead. Cantrip gets fizzled.
That's tough there. Let's head back Merriam's way now, as he does certainly win that exchange. The only thing Ross is missing now, it feels like to me, is a Treasure Cruise. That'd be a real backbreaker. Jace is just going to go up. It looks like Swiftspear's only going to attack for 1. An honest turn there for Monastery Swiftspear. Merriam with a follow-up, just another Jace. Pass that turn back. Wandering Fumarole. Looking to get activated soon enough here. Merriam playing 2 copies of that in his deck list this weekend. Treasure Cruise here for David Jones. It's on the cheap, just 1 blue mana. Away those cards go, 3 cards on the way. David Jones needs some spot removal. I think he may have found some with the way he's tapping his mana. Swiftspear to start. Now, how do we feel about the inclusion of the black cards here? Because we're going to see a duress here from David Jones, and we don't see access to any black cards in Ross Merriam's deck.
My instinct here is that the color mana situation of this deck is already sensitive enough, and you need to be playing lands untapped, that I would probably err on the side of not having black cards. Also, Duress and Murderous Cut, they're powerful cards, but there's red removal you can select from, and there's counter spells if you want, more anti-spell action. So I don't see duress as being a requirement. Certainly having access to Murderous Cut is nice, but I think that I would want to build the mana closer to the way that Ross has it.
Swiftspear going to come across here for 2. And Jace going to fall down to 1. Merriam's last card in hand, just a slip through space. He'll draw for the turn. Picked up an Abbot of Carol Keep. Now what gets interesting is, does he want to do something like activate the Jace? That would transform into Jace Telepath Unbound and lose the other one. How powerful does he feel the cards are in his hand? What is Abbot going to reveal? How does he want to sequence the turn? A lot of options here for Ross.
I think Ross doesn't really have to make a move with the Jace necessarily. He can simply plus Jace and pass the turn, and then Jones has to have a lot to punish Ross for making that sort of play. Because he needs to have enough pump spells to punch through the Jace, and at that point Ross can simply flip the other one over.
Sunken Hollow was the reveal to Abbot of Carol Keep, so that'll be the land for the turn for Merriam. Enters the battlefield untapped, thanks to all the basics out there. And now here's a slip through space. That'll target Swiftspear.
What's interesting here is, though, even though that Ross is not playing with the black cards, he still has the same sources of black mana that Jones has. Ross has 1 copy of Sunken Hollow and 1 Smoldering Marsh for overlap with some of his fetches.
Storm Chaser Mage was the draw off of the slip through space. Jace is going to tick up on Swiftspear. I mean, that's a turn where he used all of his cards, all of his mana, attacked for a relevant amount of damage. Now he just passes the turn back.
And, lingering down there among the lands there is the Wandering Fumalore, which is also something Jones has to play around here. And that's a very hard card to play around. You dial it up as a 4-1, and if Jones responds with a shock, you just make it a 1-4 and pass it back, set up the same play for next turn.
Abbot's going to reveal a Monastery Swiftspear. It looks like he doesn't have any interest in playing that one. We'll go with Jace instead. And simply pass the turn back over to Merriam, who will untap those 5 lands, couple of creatures, draw a card here. Ross able to draw a Treasure Cruise, can probably bust this game wide open.
I don't even know if he needs that much. I mean, he can slip through space the Abbot, and that's 5 damage on the table.
Well, let's see what he's reaching for here.
So he doesn't need a whole lot in terms of spells to be able to punch through lethal this turn.
Looks like he's found a roast. That'll take care of Jace. A bunch of Prowess Triggers are involved now. The Telepath Unbound will tick up, slow down the Abbot. Merriam empty-handed at this stage, but now he'll activate Jace, just draw and discard. There goes Slip Through Space. But now, Jace starts at 5, goes down to 2. And I guess he can roast again. It's actually a pretty nice turn. That's more Prowess Triggers. Get that out of the way. Here's an attack, a lethal one at that. So there has to be some blocking here for David Jones, and now I don't know if there's any coming back.
Yeah, Jones has a chump block, and again, Ross still has the land in play to attack his 4-1 next turn.
Mm-hmm. There is that powerful one. Starts as a 1-4, and then you can flip its power and toughness. It's a scary card.
And I talked a lot when we first were spoiling some cards for Battle for Zendikar, how I felt like the creature lands, Lumbering Falls, and Shambling Men, they were not as good as the World Wake analogs. They're powerful cards, and they're going to show up in decks because the opportunity cost on them is very low, and in some games they're quite powerful. But they are not Raging Ravine, they are not Creeping Tar Pit, they're not Celestial Colonnade. Wandering Fumalore is the one exception. I think that it could have been in World Wake. It's at that kind of power level. I think it's the best of the bunch by a lot.
I think it's a good one. We didn't get to see it activated that game, but perhaps we will in game number 3, as that's where we're headed. Ross Merriam does tie things up with David Jones. Little Prowess Mirror getting ready for game number 3. Very interesting deck here. Again, you can see where it feels like something's going on here. Again, it's not quite Legacy because the Brainstorms and the Ponders and all that stuff aren't involved, but you get to get through your deck quite a bit, and Treasure Cruise is a payoff that you do have access to.
Yep, and having access now to a critical mass of cantrips helps so much with the velocity for getting cards in your graveyard, and the text box on those cantrips is very relevant with prowess threats. So a lot to like out of the new set.
Well, we just went over Season 1, so we might as well go over Season 2, as it was announced by StarCityGames.com President Pete Huffling on Friday on the Select side. So if you haven't seen an announcement, you can head that way. You can stick with us right now, because after that Columbus Invitational, which will count towards Season 1 and Season 2, we'll go to Milwaukee.
Exactly, and we're going to start off like we did in Season 1 with back-to-back Modern Opens, Milwaukee and Indianapolis to start things off. Then we come back to Atlanta for Standard. Orlando will have a Standard Open. Dallas will be Modern towards the end of June. After Dallas, we go to Worcester for Legacy, Standard in Columbus, Standard in Baltimore, the Regional Championship August 6th. More information as we get a little bit closer to that event. A Modern Open in Syracuse, and then the Season 2 Invitational in New Jersey, August 19th through the 21st, Modern and Standard as the Invitational formats.
It's going to be a lot of fun for all of those events, so do plan your schedules accordingly over the summer, as we hope to see you at each and every single one of those events. We will be unveiling the playmat a little bit later over the course of the year for what will be given out at all of our opens during season number 2. But season 2, as far as the dates and locations have been announced, StarCityGames.com for more information about that, as that announcement was made by StarCityGames.com President Pete Huffling on Friday. Game number 3 here between Ross Merriam and David Jones about to be underway. Blue-Red Prowess Mirror. Look like we have some sort of deck here. Again, the thing that's going to be interesting to figure out is just the numbers on this deck. You know, the creatures, Monastery, Swiftspear, Stormchaser Mage, Abbot of Carol Keep. Those will probably be 4-ofs. And then you take a look at cards like Slip Through Space. Is it a 4-of? Maybe yes, maybe no. Same thing can be said for Expedite. I think that Magmatic Insight in some numbers is probably a good idea, as you mentioned. And then how many spot removal spells do you need, like Fiery Impulse, Roast, and Wild Slash? All that stuff you figure out as you play the deck more.
Yeah, and how many copies of Temur Battle Ranger you're supposed to play.
Exactly.
It's one of the cards in the deck that is really predicated on other things going on for it to be powerful. Some people really like having access to the kind of effect, because when it's good, it's great. Some people do not like the inconsistency of it. I think both players on 2 copies in the main deck. Ross with the ability to sideboard in the 3rd and 4th copy.
Yeah, you know, there's my inclination right now, given, you know, I've watched 2 games of the deck play, but, you know, it just doesn't feel like Titan Strength and Temur Battle Rage. I understand the combo finish that you do have available, but it just doesn't seem like it fits right now. I don't know.
With Expedite and with Slip Through Space, Temur Battle Rage becomes a very different animal, because there's going to be spots where your opponent thinks they're in the clear and they're not. And what's also very nice about having the combo here is this deck gets to play with Dispel. When you're playing a Tarka Red, when your opponent has Murderous Cut up, that's just it. There's no way for you to execute the combo until you slog through all their removal. But when you have Dispel, even if your opponent has a removal spell up, you can just punch through, execute the combo, and dispel whatever their response is.
Well, Spell a heck of a card in this format.
Yes.
The deeper we go, I mean, 1 mana counter target instant. There are so many powerful instants in this format. That's a heck of a Magic card. I think we're just going to continue to see that card rise and rise and rise and see play in this new standard format. We really like what's going on with that. Looks like Jones is going to take a look at 6 cards here. Again, keep in mind, he will be on the play.
What I also like about the Slip Through Space Expedite kind of cards, they make your deck a lot better at fighting Planeswalkers too, because you get better shots at being able to take out a Planeswalker before they become overwhelming.
That does make sense. It does seem like this deck would match up pretty well against a card like Gideon, for example.
Exactly, and that was another experience I had with playing a Tarka Red, was not that Gideon was good against you every game because it's a little on the slow side, but when they played on a stable board, that's just it. There's no hope of getting it off the table or being able to assemble lethal. But with Slip Through Space, Flyers, Expedite, you have a better shot of killing Gideon straight up. You also have a better shot of killing your opponent, even if they've had Gideon in play for several turns.
Wanted Fumarole is where Jones does start the game. Here's a Bloodstained Mire. It'll search up a basic mountain. And then we see what comes next here for David Jones. It'll be a Stormchaser Mage. In for 1 in the air. Merriam going to fall down to 19. For ahead of Ross's way for his 2nd turn. He'll draw a card. Fluted Delta in hand, among many other options for Merriam.
And Stormchaser Mage, part of what I really like about this card, first of all, a lot of just raw power. This is an excellent Magic card. If you look at the removal spells that are available in Standard, not a lot touch this thing. The Shocks don't really work. Roast doesn't work. Obzon Charm often won't work. Ultimate Price doesn't work. There's just not a whole lot of removal that kills this cleanly. We've talked a lot about there's a lack of, you know, good 2 mana, deal 3 damage type of removal. It's really only Draconic Roar, which doesn't see a lot of play.
And you can beat that pretty easily with a single spell.
Right. This is just not an easy threat for a lot of decks to answer.
Slip Through Space is going to target that. Storm Chaser Mage, so Merriam can get a little bit deeper in his deck and try to set up a nice third turn as we head back David Jones' way. Jones will draw. We'll see if he can put something explosive together this turn. He will start with a slip through space. That'll trigger Prowess to draw a card. An attack for 2 will bring Merriam down to 18. Now there's a Polluted Delta. And a Jace. 18 to 16 right now in favor of Jones as we head back Merriam's way. His third turn of the game. But now we get into that situation yet again where is it, do you kill Jace, do you kill Storm Chaser Mage, if you have the option.
And is your mana good enough to be able to play everything efficiently? You know, this deck is putting a lot of pressure on its own colored mana. It has 1 mana blue cards and 1 mana red cards, and the dual lands honestly aren't that good. And Ross doesn't even have any of them available. So he might have to be inefficient with his turns, even if he's got a handful of castable spells.
He'll start with a Wild Slash. Down goes Jace. Merriam can only pass the turn back. Remember, he cast that Magnetic Insight. He did have access to a third land, but he let it go in exchange for 2 cards. Just an attack for 1, another Wandering Fumarole, and just a passing of the turn there from Jones back over to Merriam. Merriam down to 15. Rice might have to run the gamble with Abbot of Carroll Keep, try to find a land. Monastery Swiftspear is not a land, and that'll be Merriam's turn. Storm Chaser Mage the draw there for David Jones. There's a Polluted Delta. He'll sacrifice that very quickly, fall down to 17.
And this land is so punishing against red decks when they fall behind because 4 power is a lot, and even if you have a shock, they just make it a 1/4 and run it back next turn.
Well, remember, it starts as a 1/4.
Oh, sure.
So with the flipping and stuff like that, shocks will actually work favorably depending on if they flip it.
Yeah, if mana's up, then you can simply shove for 1.
Sure.
And if they ever tap low, then you just swap.
Then you can shove for 4. It's powerful nonetheless because this is an attack that Ross can't block.
Yep.
I mean, technically he can, but he would lose his Abbot.
Right, it's a chump block.
So it's an attack for 5 and now passing the turn. That's David Jones' whole turn, but that's a good turn. Slip through space, draw.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot of Aquamoeba style stories involving this land and red removal, and people think they can tag it.
Yep.
Switching is not necessarily the best against red removal because at some point the stack clears with your thing at 1 toughness and it having 2 or 3 damage on it. That said, still very good against red removal if you're willing to play conservatively.
Ross with a Fiery Impulse. And it does have Spell Mastery, so down goes the Storm Chaser Mage, now just a passing of the turn. David Jones. Remember, he does have a Storm Chaser Mage in his hand. Polluted Delta as well. Looks like he's drawing quite a few lands here. But he will go back to the skies. The one thing neither player has cashed yet this game is Treasure Cruise. And their graveyards are certainly filling up. Looks like the beatdowns in the air are coming. Polluted Delta and just going to pass. Over to Ross. Shivan Reef the draw. He's starting to find some lands now. We know he's got spells. This will be an attack for 2. Jones will take that 2. He'll fall down to 12. Next up is Jace. Looks like Merriam will take 1. Storm Chaser Mage back on D. And now a passing of the turn. Jones will sacrifice that Polluted Delta. He's going to fall down to 11. And we'll see what land he wants to dig up. He's thinking Sunken Hollow. That'll enter the battlefield untapped, of course, given the 2 basics that are out there.
And you die a lot from this spot.
You might think you're safe, but...
Yeah, Ross is playing as much defense as he can, but as we've mentioned a couple times, these decks are a lot better playing offense than defense, especially with Jones having the creature land available. It doesn't take a whole lot here for Ross to either be dead this turn or at least be chump blocking with Jace.
I think a Treasure Cruise may have been the draw step. There's a Murderous Cut in hand.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a conflict here. You know, I think if it was something cheap and castable, Jones could pair that with the Murderous Cut and probably get a kill this turn. Treasure Cruise, unfortunately for him, is drawing from the same well as Murderous Cut.
It looks like he's being pulled in a couple different directions, so we'll see how David Jones does want to start to organize this turn. He's got a lot to think about. It felt like he's been ahead ever so slightly, but now Ross starting to catch up because he's starting to find some lands.
The issue is that the decks don't have a lot of burn in them, so it's not like it's good enough to get Ross down to 4. Yes, you have some haste threats, and you can combo with some spells and still be able to get those kind of kills, but it's not trivial to finish off the game once you've gotten someone low.
Well, here comes the Delve spell. It's a cruise. 3 cards on the way. And that'll now be the first card in the graveyard. Remember the prowess trigger there on the Storm Chaser Mage. It's 2/4 right now. Fiery Impulse, going to take care of Jace. Remember, that one only deals 2 there as opposed to 3. Because there was only 1 spell in the graveyard in Treasure Cruise. Now, Fiery Impulse will deal 3. There's a land for the turn. See what comes next here for David Jones. Remember, Murderous Cut in hand. And he could just hard cast it. I think he might start with Abbott, though. I mean, he gets to do a lot this turn.
Yep, a lot of good options here. I prefer trying to find other things to do because as a consequence of going about his business, he's likely to fill up the graveyard, and then you can be very efficient with the Murderous Cut.
He can cut now, and he will. Storm Chaser Mage down. This will be an attack for 3. Merriam going to fall down to 5. Now, this is one of those times when we can see a combo kill. Now, the Murderous Cut that David did cast should be in his graveyard, not in his exile pile. And that'll certainly matter for a deck that has Delve in it, so we want to make sure that that's clear. Speaking of delving, that's exactly what Ross Merriam is doing. So he'll delve away a bunch of cards to play a Treasure Cruise.
But now with Merriam falling to 4, he is put under enormous pressure by the Wandering Fumarole.
Now, this is one of those times where we could see the combo kill actually play a role in things.
Oh, for sure. Shields are down.
Yep. Disdainful Stroke, Wandering Fumarole, a Shivan Reef, not what the doctor ordered.
Little surprised to see Disdainful Stroke in after board. It's the answer to Treasure Cruise, and if you're expecting PA Kieran, it's the answer to that. But in this matchup, leaving up 2 mana seems really rough. Feels like both players have a ton to do with their mana every single turn.
What's next here? There's an Abbott. Reveal. Mountain. Merriam has not played a land yet for the turn. You talk about Pia and Kieran Alar. That's the kind of card that Ross wants to draw because that stabilizes everything.
Yes. It's pressure, it's instant speed answers, it's blockers, it's everything in this kind of matchup.
Ross may not play that Mountain.
Yeah, he might need blue mana.
Okay. He does. There's Shivan Reef. He'll take 1. There's Jace. And now the fingers are crossed and he hopes he doesn't die in the air. That's all he can do. Time for David Jones to draw a card. A Mountain and a Titan Strength. And Titan Strength will be more enough to get it done. David Jones going to win this match here over Ross Merriam, 2-1. The Blue-Red Prowess Mirror goes to David Jones. So congratulations to him. He is 2-0 to start the weekend. Ross Merriam will slide down to 1-1. And it's an interesting deck that we do have here in Blue-Red Prowess.